The Dyatlov Pass Incident, 1959. The last steps into the unknown, January 27, 1959. Northern Ural's Soviet Union. Snow fell in thick, silent sheets over the Ural Mountain, Dead Mountain, in the language of the indigenous Mansi people. The wind howled through the tree line, slicing through layers of wool and canvas like a blade. 9 experienced hikers, mostly students and recent graduates from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, trudged upward through knee-deep powder, their boots crunching against frozen earth. They were tired, yes, but confident. After all, they had trained for this, skied, climbed, navigated blizzards. They knew the wilderness, or so they thought. Leading the group was Igor Dyatlov, 23 years old, engineering student, natural leader, and the namesake of what would become one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. This was meant to be a Grade 3 hiking expedition, the Soviet classification for high-risk, technically demanding routes through remote wilderness. Their goal, summit Untold mountain, then return via a rarely used northern pass, a test of endurance, a rite of passage, a story to tell over vodka and laughter back in Sverdlovsk. But something went horribly, inexplicably wrong. A routine journey turns ominous. The group had departed Sverdlovsk, now Yekaterinburg, on January 23, 1959, filled with excitement. 9 souls, 7 men, 2 women. They carried cameras, diaries, skis, food for 14 days, and a state-issued permit stamped with official approval. Everything was in order. For the first week their journey went according to plan. They crossed frozen rivers, navigated dense forests, skied up gentle slopes. Igor kept a meticulous log. Luda Dubinina, the youngest at just 20, took photos with her Zenit camera. Zena Kolmogorova, 22, the group's de facto organizer, documented the daily weather. Yuri Yudin, the 10th member, had turned back early due to leg pain, a decision that would save his life and make him the only survivor connected to the expedition. On January 31st, they reached the eastern slope of Kolotsiekul. Against standard protocol, they decided to camp on the mountain's open slope instead of descending into the sheltered tree line just 1.5 kilometers away. Why, no one knows. Perhaps overconfidence, perhaps exhaustion, but that decision would seal their fate. The camp that never woke up. On February 1st, Yuri Yudin, now back in Sverdlovsk, received a postcard from Zena. It read, "We're doing great, reaching the pass soon, weather is fine." It was the last communication anyone would ever receive from the group. Back at the institute, weeks passed with no word. By February 20th, concerned friends and faculty filed a missing persons report. A massive search operation was launched. Helicopters scanned the snowfields, military units combed the forests. On February 26th, a grim discovery. The group's abandoned tent, pitched on the slope of Kolotsiekul, half buried in snow. But here's where the horror truly begins. The tent was cut open from the inside, not from the outside, as if the hikers had slashed their way out in a frantic, panicked escape. In the middle of a -30°C night, barefoot, wearing only underwear or thin socks. Scattered around the campsite were shoes, coats, gloves left behind as if fleeing an invisible terror. The first body's search teams followed a trail of footprints leading down the slope, away from the tent. Within 500 meters, under a large Siberian pine, they found the first 2 bodies, Yuri Krivonashenko and Georgy Doroshenko. Both were shoeless. One wore only a single sock. The other had wrapped his feet in strips of fabric torn from his pants. They appeared to have died from hypothermia, but why flee without proper clothing? Further down, beneath 4 meters of snow in a ravine, searchers found 3 more bodies, Igor Dyatlov, Zena Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin. They were lying in a line as if trying to return to the tent. All showed signs of severe hypothermia, but no external wounds. The case seemed tragic but explainable until the final 4 were discovered. April 1959, the final discovery. 2 months later, as the snow began to melt, a search team stumbled upon a deep ravine 75 meters from the pine tree. Buried under 4 meters of snow, they uncovered 4 more bodies, including Luda Dubinina. And this is where the story shifts from tragedy to paranormal enigma. These 4 showed catastrophic internal injuries, crushed ribs, fractured skulls, severe chest trauma, yet no external bruising. It was as if they'd been hit by a car, but without a single mark on their skin. Luda's tongue and eyes were missing, not torn off, surgically removed by some unknown force, or perhaps scavengers, yet no animal tracks were found nearby. One victim, Nikolai Thibobriknol, had a skull fracture equivalent to a fall from 10 meters or a car crash at 80 kilometers per hour, but again, no cuts, no blood on his clothes. And then there were the radiation traces. Soviet investigators found elevated levels of radiation on some of the victims' clothing, not enough to kill, but enough to raise eyebrows in a country where nuclear testing, secret military projects, and Cold War paranoia were at their peak. The official investigation closes, but questions multiply. On May 1959, Soviet authorities abruptly closed the case. The official explanation: a compelling natural force, a phrase so vague it became infamous. No cause was specified, no suspects named, files were classified, families were told not to speak of it. The incident vanished into Soviet bureaucracy. but not into obscurity, because what really happened on that frozen slope? Was it an avalanche, a military experiment gone wrong, secret weapons testing aliens, Mansi spirits, or something even more terrifying, human error mixed with the raw, indifferent cruelty of nature? Over the next 6 decades, the Dyatlov Pass incident would become a global obsession, studied by scientists, dissected by conspiracy theorists, dramatized in films, and reinvestigated by governments. But the truth, it remains buried in the snow, in the silence, on Dead Mountain. 60 years later, the mystery of Dyatlov Pass isn't just unsolved, it's a living wound in the history of exploration. The official Soviet explanation, a compelling natural force, satisfied no one. It was a bureaucratic curtain dropped on a stage where 9 people had just performed their final, terrifying act. But for investigators, both amateur and professional, the play was just beginning. The curtain was lifted and the theories flooded in. Let's start with the most logical one: the avalanche. This theory suggests a small localized slab avalanche struck the tent in the dead of night. The weight of the snow would explain why they had to cut their way out from the inside. Panic sets in. They're disoriented, freezing, and they flee downhill to the relative safety of the tree line. This could explain the initial escape. The crushing internal injuries, potentially from the immense pressure of the snow before they even escape the tent. It sounds plausible, right? But it has holes. Experienced hikers like Dyatlov's group knew this slope wasn't prone to avalanches. Post-incident surveys found no signs of one. And why would they run so far from the tent, leaving their warm clothes behind? An avalanche doesn't explain the missing tongue or the radiation. It's a neat box, but the facts refuse to fit inside it. So, if not nature, then what about man? This is where the story takes a dark, Cold War turn. Remember, this was 1959, the height of the space race and the nuclear arms race. The northern Urals were a hotbed of secret Soviet military activity. One popular theory points to secret weapons testing. Imagine the hikers witnessing something they shouldn't have: a parachute mine test, a sonic weapon, or even a missile launch gone wrong. The bright lights in the sky, reported by other campers in the region around the same time, suddenly seemed significant. A powerful explosion could create a concussive blast wave, causing the severe internal injuries without leaving external marks. The panic, the flight from the tent, it could all be a desperate attempt to escape a military cleanup crew sent to eliminate any witnesses. This would explain the authorities' haste to classify the files and shut down the investigation. They weren't hiding a monster. They were hiding a state secret. The radiation found on the clothing adds fuel to this fire. Was it fallout from a nearby test site? This theory paints a chilling picture of human cruelty, not supernatural horror. But what if the danger was neither natural nor military? The local Mansi people have their own legends about this region. Declassified, or Dead Mountain, is not a name given lightly. They speak of spirits, of ancient curses, and of a place where 9 hunters once vanished, leaving their spirits to roam the slopes. Some theorists believe the hikers trespassed on sacred ground. Could they have disturbed something? The Mansi were initially considered suspects by the Soviets, but they were quickly cleared. They insisted that whatever happened was not the work of man. Their shamans speak of powerful entities that protect the mountains. While it's easy to dismiss this as folklore, is it possible the hikers encountered something that defies our modern understanding? Perhaps the compelling natural force was something far older and more mysterious than an avalanche. This leads us into the realm of the truly strange, the paranormal and the extraterrestrial. The strange lights in the sky weren't just seen by other campers. They were documented in meteorological reports and even by military personnel. Some accounts described glowing orbs or spheres moving silently across the sky. Could the Dyatlov group have had a close encounter? Proponents of this theory suggest the hikers were either attacked or simply frightened to death by an extraterrestrial presence. The catastrophic yet mark-free injuries could be the result of advanced energy weapons. The missing tongue and eyes, a horrific form of biological sampling. The radiation, byproduct of a UFO's propulsion system. It sounds like science fiction, but when conventional explanations fail, people start looking for unconventional answers. Is it possible the truth of Dyatlov Pass is not buried on Earth, but somewhere out in the stars? Let's consider one more, often overlooked possibility: human psychology under extreme duress. This is the infrasound theory. Infrasound is low-frequency sound, below the range of human hearing, that can be generated by certain wind patterns, like those found on a mountain pass. While you can't hear it, your body can feel it. Studies have shown that exposure to infrasound can induce feelings of intense anxiety, dread, panic, and even hallucinations. Imagine being in that tent, in the dark, as a fierce wind creates an infrasound vortex. You're suddenly overcome by a wave of inexplicable terror. You feel like the tent is crushing you. You have to get out. You slash your way out and run, not from a physical threat, but from a feeling. This could explain the panicked escape. Once outside, hypothermia, confusion, and falls in the dark. Rocky terrain could account for the rest. The catastrophic injuries could have been from a terrible fall into the ravine. The missing tongue. It might have been scavenged by small animals after death, something the initial autopsy might have missed. It's a compelling scientific explanation for a seemingly supernatural event. In 2019, over 60 years after the incident, the Russian government reopened the case. Their conclusion, announced in 2020, was a modified version of the avalanche theory. They proposed a slab avalanche triggered by the hikers themselves when they cut into the slope to pitch their tent. They argued that poor visibility and panic led to their deaths, but for many, this conclusion felt just as hollow as the first one. It still didn't account for the radiation or the strange injuries. The mystery remains. So what are we left with? We have 9 dead hikers, a tent cut from the inside, bodies with inexplicable injuries, traces of radiation, and a government that sealed the files for decades. Was it an avalanche, a secret military operation, angry spirits, an alien encounter, or a trick of the wind? Every theory seems to explain a piece of the puzzle, but none can fit them all together. The truth of the Dyatlov Pass incident is like a ghost. You can feel its presence, you can see the trail it left behind, but you can never quite grasp it. The 9 hikers went looking for an adventure, a story to tell. They found one, but it wasn't the one they expected. It's a story that has outlived them, a story that continues to be told, whispered around campfires and debated in online forums. It's a chilling reminder that there are still corners of our world where the line between the known and the unknown is terrifyingly thin, and sometimes the questions are more powerful than any answer. Thanks for watching, and if you have your own theory, let us know in the comments below. Follow for more deep dives into the world's greatest mysteries. Welcome back. In 1959, 9 Soviet hikers died under bizarre circumstances in the Ural Mountains. For 60 years, their deaths remained one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries. Then, in 2019, something incredible happened. The Russian government officially reopened the Dyatlov Pass case. The world held its breath. Was the truth finally within reach? Or was this just another chapter in a long history of cover-ups? This is the final part of our investigation. The 2019 re-investigation was a massive undertaking. For the first time, modern forensic science was brought to bear on the 6-decade-old mystery. Russian prosecutors, aided by geologists, meteorologists, and forensic pathologists, returned to Kolat. They used ground-penetrating radar to map the snowpack and 3D computer modeling to recreate the conditions on that fateful night. Their goal was to scientifically test the 3 most rational theories: an avalanche, a snowboard event, a type of localized snowslide, or a hurricane. They immediately dismissed any criminal or exotic theories like military tests or paranormal events. This raised eyebrows. Was the investigation designed to find the truth, or just a plausible, non-controversial answer? The team focused heavily on the avalanche theory, which had been revived by Swiss researchers. The new Russian model supported the idea that a combination of factors, the hikers cutting into the slope to pitch their tent, heavy snowfall, and powerful katabatic winds, could have created a small, delayed slab avalanche. This slab, weighing several tons, wouldn't have buried the tent but would have impacted it with enough force to cause panic and potentially some of the injuries. According to this new official conclusion, the hikers, fearing a second, larger avalanche, cut their way out and fled to the forest for shelter. Disoriented in the dark and extreme cold, they succumbed to hypothermia. The severe crush injuries on the 4 found in the ravine were explained by the immense pressure of the snow that later filled the den they had dug for shelter, a phenomenon known as diagenesis, where snow compacts and hardens into something like concrete. But as with every official explanation in this case, the critics were loud and numerous. What about the radiation? The investigators claimed it could be explained by thorium from camping lantern mantles, a common item at the time, although no lantern remnants were ever catalogued. What about the missing eyes and tongue? They attributed this to natural decomposition and scavenging by small animals in the watery environment of the ravine. And the orange spheres in the sky, dismissed as either meteorological phenomena or flares from other sources, completely unrelated to the hikers' deaths. For many, including the families and independent researchers, these explanations felt too neat, too convenient. They seemed to gloss over the most disturbing details that have fueled speculation for decades. While the official case was being closed again, independent researchers were digging into newly declassified archives from the KGB, and what they found was stunning. Files revealed that the initial 1959 investigation was far more extensive than previously known. Military officials were on site almost immediately. The lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, was ordered by high-ranking party officials to close the case and classify all materials. One document contained a cryptic note about testing a new type of weapon in the area, which could produce a light and sound effect similar to what witnesses described. Could this be the smoking gun, a failed test of a concussion or radiological weapon that either killed the hikers directly or induced the panic that led to their deaths? This brings us to one of the most poignant and chilling pieces of evidence to come to light in recent years. Forensic re-examination of the victim's clothing revealed something overlooked in 1959, a scarf found wrapped around the face of Semyon Zolotaryov. One of the men found in the ravine was tested for DNA. The results were shocking. The scarf contained traces of Ludmila Dubinina's blood, Ludmila whose body was found nearby with horrific internal injuries and her tongue missing. This detail paints a heartbreaking picture. In his final moments did Semyon, himself grievously injured, try to comfort his dying friend, using the scarf to perhaps clean her face or provide warmth. It's a moment of profound humanity amidst the horror, and it strongly argues against any theory of internal conflict. They weren't fighting each other, they were fighting for each other until the very end. So, where does this leave us? We have an official conclusion, an avalanche that is scientifically plausible yet emotionally and evidentially unsatisfying for many. We have tantalizing hints of a military cover-up, buried in redacted files and the deathbed confessions of old KGB agents. And we have the human story, one of courage and tragedy, captured in that final, desperate act of compassion. The Dyatlov Pass incident is not just a mystery of what happened, it's a mystery of why it was hidden. The avalanche theory explains how they might have died, but it doesn't explain the secrecy, the classified files, the armed guards at the morgue, or the fear that silenced witnesses for half a century. Perhaps the true answer lies in a combination of theories: a natural event, like a small avalanche that forced the hikers out of their tent, only for them to stumble upon something they weren't meant to see, a secret military operation. The panic from the avalanche, compounded by the terror of a military encounter, and accelerated by the brutal cold. This could explain both the physical evidence and the subsequent cover-up. It ties together nature's fury with human secrets. 60-plus years later, the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, the mountain of the dead, still hold their secrets. The 9 graves in Yekaterinburg are a permanent memorial to 9 vibrant young souls whose final adventure became an eternal enigma. We may never know the complete, objective truth of what transpired on that freezing night, but in pursuing the question, we honor their memory and confront the terrifying, fascinating line between what we know and what we can only imagine. The story of the Dyatlov Pass hikers endures not just as an unsolved case, but as a timeless reminder of human fragility in the face of nature as power and the shadows of our own secrets. Thanks for watching. If this story has fascinated you, please subscribe for more deep dives into the world's greatest mysteries. But the doubts remain. Despite the scientific elegance of the avalanche theory, many experts and the families of the hikers are still unconvinced. Why? Because the original 1959 investigators, who were seasoned mountaineers themselves, saw no signs of an avalanche. Their reports explicitly state, no traces of snow displacement, no fracture lines, no debris. Also, the footprints leading from the tent were clear, deep, and undisturbed, which seems impossible if an avalanche had just swept through. Then there's the timeline. If the avalanche hit between 3 and 5 a.m., why did the hikers manage to walk a full 1.5 kilometers downhill, build a fire, and even attempt to return to the tent as the positions of Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin suggest? And perhaps most telling, why did they cut the tent from the inside? Experienced hikers know that in an avalanche threat, you exit through the door, not slash your only shelter. Slashing implies panic. Yes, but it could also imply an immediate, overwhelming threat that was already inside the tent with them. While the avalanche theory dominated headlines, independent researchers dug deeper into newly released archives. In 2020, Russian historian Yulia Kleinina gained access to previously sealed KGB regional reports. Among them was a memo from Sverdlovsk KGB headquarters, dated February 3, 1959. It read, Expedition Dyatlov located in proximity to Sector Gamma. Recommend immediate retrieval of all photographic materials, possible exposure to unauthorized luminous phenomena. Maintain silence. Sector Gamma was a known missile telemetry zone. Luminous phenomena matches witness reports from other groups in the area who saw strange orange orbs in the sky that night. Even more chilling is a handwritten note from the lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, found in his personal archive after his death. It said, The injuries, not of this world, not avalanche, not animal, not man. I fear what I cannot write. He later told journalists, I was removed from the case after I asked about radiation. They said, forget it, or you'll disappear too. One of the most poignant discoveries came from a forensic re-examination of the clothing. Luda Dubinina's woolen scarf, found wrapped tightly around her neck, was tested with modern DNA analysis. It contained traces of blood from 2 people, Luda herself and Seaman Zolotaryev, the oldest hiker and a World War II veteran. Why would his blood be on her scarf? Researchers propose a heartbreaking scenario after the initial escape. Seaman, perhaps less affected by hypothermia due to his age and experience, tried to help Luda. She was small and likely the first to succumb to the cold. He may have wrapped her in his coat, tied the scarf to keep her warm, and even cut fabric from his own clothes to insulate her. In doing so, he bled onto her scarf, perhaps from frostbite wounds or cuts from the ice. This wasn't evidence of violence, it was evidence of courage in their final moments. In 2022, a team from Ural Federal University, used advanced technology like LiDAR scanning and drones to create a 3D digital twin of the Dyatlov Pass site as it appeared in 1959. Their simulation showed that the ravine where the 4 most injured bodies were found was completely invisible from the tent, hidden by snowdrifts. In the darkness, it would have been a deadly trap. They also confirmed that no traditional avalanche path existed above the tent, but a cornice overhang did exactly where the Swiss model predicted instability. The digital model supports a hybrid theory. A micro-avalanche or cornice collapse struck the tent, causing panic. The hikers fled, became disoriented by the extreme cold and darkness, and some fell into the hidden ravine. A secondary icefall then caused their fatal injuries. It's the most scientifically coherent explanation to date, but science can only explain the physics. The archives may hint at military cover-ups, but the human element, the terror in their final breaths, the slashed tent, the bare feet in the snow transcends all data. The Dyatlov Pass incident endures, not just because it's unsolved, but because it mirrors our deepest fears. The fragility of human life against the power of nature, the silence of governments when truth threatens power, and the terrifying unknown that waits just beyond the campfire's light. Even with modern forensics, we may never know exactly what they saw, what they heard, or why they ran. But perhaps that's the point. Some mountains are meant to remain mysteries. In our final part, we'll explore the incredible cultural legacy of the Dyatlov Pass incident, its influence on films, books, and internet culture. We'll examine why unsolved mysteries captivate us and what this story reveals about our relationship with the unknown. We'll also share lessons for modern adventurers and ask whether closure is even possible. The mountain is still watching, and we're still listening. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the final chapter. Thanks for watching.